Hey, well, welcome to another Team S&G deck profile. This is we're gonna be profiling Zombie World Vendread. The deck is really great. It has a lot of control elements with the Rivalry lock and with Zombie World and Doom King Ballardrock, but it also has a lot of consistency because the Vendread engine mills a lot of cards to the grave. It lets you send cards from your hand to the grave. And so it sort of gets the zombie engine rolling using the Vendread engine, and the Vendread engine gets rolling because the zombie engine mills a lot of stuff as well. And so you sort of get to set yourself up in a really good situation where you're sending everything to the grave, and it's zombies, so everything likes to be in the grave. So on top of the main deck profile, as usual, what we're going to do is we're going to have a combo tutorial at the end. This combo will talk about how to utilize the Zombie World component of the deck. And it will also give you some ideas on how you could potentially utilize the Vendread engine in the deck. The Vendread engine is a little more difficult to explain in the combo tutorial. It's kind of a trial and error. You sort of need to test with it. But the main combo you're going to want to go into is the Zombie World combo to get Doom King Ballardrock on the board, which this deck can do really quickly and really efficiently. Stick around for the combo tutorial at the end, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Enjoy the deck profile. As always, we're going to start off with the monsters. We've broken it down into the three engines we run. The first engine we run are just our play starters. We have 6 of them, and the first one, obviously, is Unizombie. This is a pretty generic play starter for any zombie build deck. What this does is when it's on the field, you can send a zombie from your hand to the grave to increase a level of a monster on the field by 1. You can also send one from the deck to the grave, which means you can mill exactly what it is you need to get your combos started. So this is one of your main play starters. He's a tuner, which is really useful because we do run some synchros, but he's also a tuner, which makes him really useful for the second play starter that we run. The second play starter we run 3 copies of Shiranui Solitaire. I do run a couple of Shiranuis in the extra deck, so he can have some utility with his banish effect of bringing a Shiranui back from the banish pile later in the game. However, typically I don't really go into the Shiranuis in the extra deck, so really he is just here to tribute himself to special summon Unizombie from the deck so that you can get your plays started with Unizombie. This is basically just making it so we have 6 copies of Unizombie at the end of the day. We also run some generic zombie support. We run 2 copies of Mizuki and 1 copy of Gozuki. Gozuki, when he's been summoned, lets you send a zombie from the deck to the grave, which lets you again set up your graveyard. And Mizuki lets you banish himself to special summon a zombie from the grave. Gozuki also lets you banish a zombie from grave to special summon a zombie from hand. So if you end up with Doom King Ballardrock in your hand and no way to get him onto the field or into the grave, but you have Gozuki in grave, you can use his effect, banish a zombie, and special summon your Doom King Ballardrock that way. So that gives you sort of the fluidity and the ability to get problem monsters out of your hand onto the field. Now we run a pretty typical Zombie World lineup. We run 2 copies of Glow Up Bloom, 2 copies of Necro World Banshee, and 2 copies of Doom King Ballardrock. Glow Up Bloom, if sent to the grave, you can banish him to special summon a zombie from the deck so long as you've got Zombie World on the field. If you don't have Zombie World on the field, you can add a zombie from deck to hand. The problem is limited. It needs to be a level 5 or higher zombie. Now we do run another target for him. Necro World Banshee protects Zombie World, but it also banishes itself to activate Zombie World from the deck. It makes it so we run a couple of extra copies of Zombie World in the deck. And Doom King Ballardrock, whenever a zombie's effect goes off, he can negate that monster's effect, or he can banish that monster, and he can do both. He can banish and negate once per turn. So he can be really oppressive, he can be difficult, and he brings himself back from the grave every turn if there is a field spell in either field zones. So if your opponent plays a deck that has field spells in it and you have Doom King Ballardrock in your grave, you still get to bring back your Doom King Ballardrock, which is really useful. Now let's go on to the Vendread engine. The Vendread engine, we run 2 copies of Vendread Revenants. Vendread Revenants is a really useful card. If it's on the field when you ritual summon and you use it as material, then once per turn, as a quick effect, the monster ritual summoned with it can banish a special summoned monster from the field. The other thing it does is if it is destroyed by battle, then you can bring it back straight from the grave. Vendread Revenants can be really useful. The main reason I run him, though, is because of the very simple fact that we run ritual monsters from the Vendread engine, and being able to summon that monster with the ability to banish a special summon monster can really derail a lot of your opponent's plays. Now, in a similar line of thought, we also run 2 copies of Vendread Houndhorde. Vendread Houndhorde, again, much like Vendread Revenants, if it's used as material while on the field, you can banish a spell or trap once per turn as a quick effect. It can be a really useful removal for the back row, because sometimes this deck could have trouble with the back row. The other thing is that if it is sent to the graveyard, you can discard a Vendread card, and you can special summon it from the grave. There you go. That's sort of the main idea behind the Vendread Houndhorde being in the deck. Now we also run some one-ofs in the Vendread engine. We run 1 copy of Vendread Strigus, 1 copy of Vendread Anima, and 1 copy of Vendread Core. Vendread Strigus is a really useful card for triggering things like Vampire Sucker, because if it's in the grave, you just have to reveal a Vendread card in your hand, special summon it from the grave. Vendread Anima, if it's in the grave, you can banish it to special summon a Vendread that's been banished. And with Vendread Core, you can banish another zombie to special summon it. So you can use them to build materials on board. The other benefits are, obviously, when they used on the field as ritual materials. If you use Vendread Strigus, you get to, after the damage calculation, if your monster the ritual summoned monster destroys a card by battle, you get to draw a card and then discard a card. So this can be really useful for setting up your grave again. With Vendread Anima, if it's on the field, then any monster that is destroyed by battle with the ritual monster that used it as material, that monster gets banished instead of being sent to the grave. And with Vendread Core, your opponent cannot target the ritual summoned monster with card effects if you use Vendread Core as one of the materials. So we talked a lot about the ritual monsters that gain effects from the smaller Vendreads. The ritual monster that we use is 3 copies of Vendread Slayer. Now the reason we use this rather than the others is because this card has a really useful effect in that when it gets sent from field to grave, and that's sent so you can trigger it when you link summon, you can search out a Vendread ritual spell, and you can send from the deck a Vendread monster. So you can use this to send, say, Strigus, reveal the ritual spell, special summon the Strigus, and that can be used to, again, trigger Vampire Sucker, letting you draw a card, and other things like that. So Vendread Slayer is really useful in that sense, and also it deck thins for you because of that. So that does it for our monster lineup. Now that we've talked about our monster lineup, let's talk about our spell lineup. So, the first thing we run is a staple of in this deck. It's 3 copies of Zombie World. Now this is a kind of the win con of the deck, really, and that is because it turns everything into zombies, including everything in the grave. So you can sort of benefit off of your opponent bringing things back from the grave as well, because they will all be zombies. This is really sort of one of the win cons for the deck. Now we also run 2 copies of Super Poly, and that's because once we turn everything into graves, we can use them to special summon Dragon Necro Nether Soul Dragon using materials on our opponent's side of the field or on our side of the field, and we can do this on our opponent's turn. So that's why we run 2 copies of Super Poly. We do run some other targets for it in the extra deck, which we'll get to when we get there. We also run 2 copies of Allure of Darkness. A lot of the cards we run are dark, so you should be able to use this pretty safely in the deck. Now, to support the Vendreads, we run 2 copies of Pre-Preparation of Rites. The ritual spell that we run for them, Revendread Origin, actually does name Vendread Slayer on it, so you can use Pre-Preparation of Rites to just add both to your hand. We run 3 copies of that ritual spell. It lets you use materials from your hand, field, or you can banish zombies from the grave. So you don't actually even have to banish Vendreads from the grave. You can banish any zombie from the grave. The deck has lots of utility in that sense. The other option we have is Vendread evolution. Now, I don't use this very much. The other thing this does is it lets me use a material, one Vendread monster from the deck. The downside is I have to make it equal exactly to the level of Vendread Slayer. And then, finally, for the Vendread engine, we run 2 copies of Vendread Charge. Now, the benefit of this is it also helps the zombie engine, because what you do is you send a zombie from hand to grave to special summon a Vendread from the deck. So, this can be a really useful card to have. That does it for our spell lineup. So, for the trap lineup. Now, like in many of my decks, the trap lineup is quite small. This one only consists of 5 cards. The first card we run is we run 2 copies of Dark Sacrifice. Now, this is a negate on your opponent's turn, but it's also the ability to trigger off things like Glow Up Bloom on your opponent's turn, because what it does is it sends a level 3 or lower monster from the deck to the grave after negating your opponent's effect. Now, the one downside is it can only negate destruction effects. So if your opponent's got a card effect that doesn't destroy a card on the field, unfortunately Dark Sacrifice can't negate that. So that's why we run 2 copies of that. And then we also run 3 copies of the Rivalry of Warlords. And the reason for that is because the Rivalry lock in this deck is really clutch. The ability to lock your opponents into zombies, and then if your opponent's not playing zombies, they're basically locked into one monster, is really clutch. You do have to be careful with this, though, because it also means that you can't use your Super Poly for your Necro Dragon, because of the fact that that is a dragon type, and so you can't special summon it from the extra deck. So there are some downsides to this, but for the most part, this is a relatively safe play for you. If you can get it off set on the first turn, then you're in even better shape, because it means that you can continue to climb and do stuff on your turn, and you could even go into your Dragon Necro at the start of your opponent's turn, the minute they summon 2 monsters, and then if they go to summon a third, then you activate this to keep them at that point. So this can be really useful and really, really clutch. And that does it for our trap lineup. So the first Link monster we run has already been mentioned a couple times, and that is Vampire Sucker. Now, Vampire Sucker has 3 effects. It lets you for a tribute summon from your opponent's side of the field a zombie monster. It lets you bring a zombie from your opponent's graveyard back onto the field, so you can use that as an attack target. And every time a zombie monster comes back from either graveyard, you get to draw a card. Now, all of these effects are once per turn, but being able to go plus just for having this on the field is really useful. We run 2 copies of a Vendread Savior. Now, Vendread Savior is really good too, because of the very simple fact that A, he counts as Vendread Slayer, so he's protected by Vendread Origin being in the grave, because you can banish that off to protect Vendread Slayer. B, he can target a Vendread card in the grave and add it back to your hand, so it lets you recycle your Vendreads. And C, during damage calculation, you can send a card from the deck to the grave to increase his attack by 200 for every level of that monster. Sometimes it's beneficial to let him go, but a lot of the time you sort of want to keep him on board, so what I tend to do is I tend to send Doom King Ballardrock and just let Doom King Ballardrock come back next turn. So that's why I run him. And then we run 1 copy of Borrelsword, because as I've stated in previous videos, check them out on the channel, Borrelsword has to be in every deck these days. We run several different synchros. The first synchro that we run is Borreload Savage Dragon. Now, this is pretty typical. What it does is it equips a Link monster from grave to it, and it gets a negate once per turn for each rating of the Link monster, and it gains half of that Link monster's attack as well. So you bring back, say, Vampire Sucker, equip it to him, he gains 800 attack, and he gets 2 counters on him. You remove counter once per turn to negate your opponent's effects. $100 attack and defense for every zombie in both graveyards, or in the graveyards. So basically, if you have Zombie World on field and your opponent's got a bunch of monsters in the graveyard, he's going to gain 100 attack for each one of them, and he's going to gain 100 attack for each zombie monster you have in the graveyard. He also has a secondary effect, which is also really useful, especially if you have Zombie World on field, which is, if you destroy something by battle, you can special summon a zombie monster from either graveyard back to your field. We run one copy of Beazle, the Diabolic Dragons. Beazle is really useful because of the fact that he's not targetable, and he can't be destroyed by battle. So your opponent has to find a different way around it that basically needs to find a non-targeting, non-destroying removal to get rid of him. Which is sometimes really difficult. For a lot of decks, this can be quite a problem. He also gains attack every time you take effect damage or battle damage involving him. We run one copy of Dark End Dragon. Dark End Dragon is really good because of the fact that once per turn, you can target one monster your opponent controls, and this card will lose 500 attack and defense, but you get to send that card to the graveyard. If your opponent's got like a problem monster on board that you need to get rid of, but it's immune to destruction, this is a good way of getting rid of it. However, it also needs to be targetable. So if it's not targetable, then you still can't use him for that. But there are certain monsters that this is really useful against. And finally, we run one copy of Shiranui Shogun Saga. Now, the main reason we run this is to push for game. What Shiranui Shogun Saga does is, when it's special summoned, you can banish a zombie from the grave, and it gains attack equal to that zombie's attack till the end of the turn. So, it lets you push for game in a big way, but other than that, I don't really use it for anything else. I won't go into it that often, though. Now for Super Poly targets. We run one Duplexer Chimera to deal with Salamangreat matchup or Cyburst matchup, Marin Cess, anything that's a Cyburst monotype deck. This lets us deal with that. That's only if we don't have Zombie World on the field, because if we have Zombie World, then everything becomes zombies. We run one Salamangreat Violet Chimera. This, again, similar sort of idea. Your opponent gets two Salamangreat monsters on the field, send them both off, Super Poly target. And then we also run one Starving Venom Fusion Dragon. Now these are pretty standard Super Poly targets. Starving Venom Fusion Dragon is two Darks, Duplex Chimera is two Cybers, Violet Chimera is two Salamangreats. So, this is a pretty standard Super Poly lineup. We also run one not necessarily standard Super Poly lineup, and that is, as I said earlier, two Dragon Necro Nether Soul Dragons. So, what this has a really useful effect too, because when it attacks any opponent's monster, that monster doesn't get destroyed by battle, but its attack gets lowered to 0. You then get to generate a token whose level is equal to the original level and whose of the monster that was battled, but also whose attack is equal to the original attack of the opponent's monster that was battled. So you basically attack into something big with this, say 2500. You then lower that monster's attack to 0. Then you special summon a token. Then you attack that monster with the token, and you've inflicted 2500 damage straight to your opponent. So he can be really useful to help you push for game. He also generates tokens, which can be really useful to link off later on, so on and so forth. So he's a really useful card to have, and being able to make him without costing you anything but taking 2 cards from your opponent because of Super Poly is clutch, and can really change the flow of any game. So that does it for our extra deck. So, welcome to the combo tutorial. We're going to use, this is our field center as we usually do. The basic combo that I'm going to talk about first is your main Zombie World combo. There's lots of different hands that can get you into this. The goal basically is to get Uni-Zombie onto the field. Now, there are ways of doing that. You could have Shiranui Solitaire. If you normal summon Shiranui Solitaire, use Shiranui Solitaire's effect, tribute him off, special summon Uni-Zombie from the deck. That gets Uni-Zombie straight onto the field. Or you can have Uni-Zombie in hand. Normal summon Uni-Zombie, and then use Uni-Zombie's effect from there. Now, if you've got a way of getting Uni-Zombie onto the field, and you have any of these 3 cards in your hand, then you are good to go. So we'll start with Unizombie on the field, and let's start with Necroworld Banshee being in your hand. So what you're going to do is you're going to activate Unizombie's effect to send Necroworld Banshee from your hand to grave, and then you're going to banish Necroworld Banshee to activate Zombie World straight from your deck. You can then use Unizombi's second effect to send Glow Up Bloom from the deck to the grave, banish him off, and that will let you special summon into your Doom King Ballardrock. From here, you can basically do whatever it is you'd like to do. What I tend to like doing is, if I'm going first, I'll tribute both of them. I'll link both of them away for Vampire Sucker, and then during my opponent's standby phase, Doom King Ballardrock will revive itself because Zombie World's on board, and then that lets you draw a card from Vampire Sucker's effect. That's what I tend to like to do. However, in some situations, it's better just to keep Doom King on the board. So, the other option, or the other way of doing this, is having Unizombie on board, and this time, instead of having Necroworld Banshee in hand, we're going to have Glow Up Bloom in hand. It's a very similar idea. This time, you're going to activate Unizombie's effect, target Unizombie, and instead of sending Necroworld Banshee from hand, because you don't have it in hand, you have Glow Up Bloom, you're going to send Necroworld Banshee from the deck to the grave, banish it, activate Zombie World from the deck, and then you're going to use Unizombie's second effect, or first effect, as it's written, to send Glow Up Bloom, banish Glow Up Bloom, special summon Doom King Ballardrock. The final variant of this is if you've got Zombie World in hand. Now, the reason that this works is because if Zombie World's already in hand, then you don't need to send Necroworld Banshee at all. You can activate Unizombie's effect to send Glow Up Bloom instead from the deck. Now, the reason you do this is what you're going to do is you're going to normal summon your Unizombie, you're going to activate Zombie World from your hand, and then what you're going to do is you're going to activate Unizombie's effect to send Glow Up Bloom, banish Glow Up Bloom, Doom King Ballardrock. Really simple sort of combo here. Now, you can get more complicated if you bring in the Vendread engine and stuff like that. However, for the sake of this video, I'm just going to keep it quite simple. That's the basic combo there. That's sort of what you want to do. It's a good board to end on with Zombie, and that's just your pure Zombie World combo. The main goal of any Vendread combo is to end up with Vendread Slayer on board, or in the grave, depending on how you want to go about it. If you can do this in a way that lets you use Vendread Revenants and Vendread Houndhorde from the field, that's even better, because now your Vendread Slayer is going to be able to banish not only a special summon monster every turn, but it's also going to be able to banish a spell or trap, which can make it really difficult for your opponents to combo off and to go into deeper plays. So, one way of going about this is having Unizombie already in the grave, or already in your hand. The first easy combo is to use Unizombie. If you have Unizombie and pre-preparation of rites, you can do this. The way you would do it is you'd normal summon your Unizombie, you'd activate your pre-prep, you would search out your Vendread Origin and your Vendread Slayer. Then you'd use Unizombie's effect to send Vendread Houndhorde from deck to grave. You would then use Vendread Houndhorde's effect to send Vendread Slayer to the grave, special summon back Vendread Houndhorde, activate Vendread Origin. This will give you, using these two as your materials, special summon this back from the grave. This will give you the ability to banish a spell or trap once per turn, which can be really valuable. There's one way to get Vendread Slayer on the board with Vendread Revenant's bonus effect of being able to banish off a special summon monster once per turn. The one method for it is to use these two cards, Pre-Preparation of Rites and Vendread Charge. Now, it's technically a 2.5 card combo because you're going to need a zombie to pitch for Vendread Charge, but you could get that off of your Pre-Preparation of Rites. I like to do it with a zombie, because it makes it so that you're going to have the levels you need already set up. So what I tend to do is I go Pre-Preparation of Rites, and I search out my Vendread Slayer and my Vendread Origin again. Then, if you have no other zombies in hand, you can activate Vendread Charge and pitch the Vendread Slayer to special summon your Vendread Revenants. Now, this can be really useful if you've also gotten lucky and ended up with Vendread Houndhorde in hand, because you now normal summon Houndhorde and you get both. But if you don't have Vendread Houndhorde in hand, you do need another zombie because you need to get to level 6, which can be quite tough. If you have another zombie in hand, instead of pitching your Vendread Slayer, what you're going to do is, with Vendread Charge, what you're going to do is you're going to activate Vendread Charge, pitch that other zombie, so in this instance we're going to say Uni-Zombie, to special summon your Vendread Revenants. You're going to already have used your pre-preparation of rites to search out these two. Then you're going to activate this, banish off the Uni-Zombie from the grave, banish off your Uni-Zombie from grave, send him to grave, and special summon this way. And this will give you that banish monster effect, which can be really valuable too. So that sort of does it for the combos. This sort of gives you an idea of what the Vendreads can do, and it also gives you an idea of what the zombie world can do. When you combine the two of them, the Vendreads will send a lot of cards to grave, because using this as link material will trigger its effect to take one card out of the deck, add it to your hand in Vendread in a ritual spell, but it'll also take one card out of the deck and send it to the grave. So you do sort of thin the deck quite quickly, so it doesn't really matter that you're playing 45 cards, because you will get through the deck quite quickly using the Vendread engine. So my final thoughts on this deck are that it can be quite an oppressive deck. You can get the Zombie World Rivalry lock on the field quite easily and quite consistently, what with these being your starters, meaning you run 6 starters in the entire deck. And they can quite consistently get you to Doom King Baladrock on turn 1, with Zombie World, which is really an oppressive board, because it means that anything that your opponent activates will trigger Doom King Baladrock's effect. The other thing that you can do is, if, say, for instance, you can't get into Doom King Baladrock, if you're able to get into Vendread Houndhorde and Revenants both being on the field, and being able to then ritual summon out Vendread Slayer, you can then banish off a spell and trap once per turn as a quick effect, which can be really valuable too. So the main support cards for this deck that I tend to find most valuable are a good old-fashioned copy of Vendread Origin, getting you into your Vendread Slayer, and a copy of Rivalry of Warlords. And obviously your main win con for this deck is going to be your Zombie World. Being able to get that on the board consistently turn 1 is really valuable, and that can make it so that you can win almost any matchup. I really enjoy the deck. I think that it can do quite well. I think it could probably do quite well at a regional level, and it can do quite well at a locals level. It does have some bad matchups. Altergeist can be a bit of a problem for it if they manage to establish a board with a strong back row. But for the most part, this deck can sort of outgrind a lot of decks as well, because it does recur a lot of stuff from the grave. Going first, this deck is really consistent. Going second, as long as you've got ways to play through possibly 1 or 2 negates, which this deck can do, what with the Vendread engine baiting out negates some of the time, this deck can do really well. So that does it for this profile, and all I can say is take this deck with you. Make it. Take it to locals, take it to regionals, have some fun. Let me know how you do, and I'll see you at the next profile.